My name is Jorge Mario Bergoglio, though now many call me PopeFrancis. But before I ever stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, before I ever wore the white cassock or lifted the chalice before a congregation of millions, I was simply Jorge, a boy growing up in the working-class neighborhoods of Buenos Aires, Argentina. My story is not extraordinary because of titles or history-making moments. It is extraordinary only because of God's grace and mercy, which followed me, shaped me, broke me, and built me again throughout my life. I was born on December 17, 1936, in a simple home in the Flores neighborhood. My father, Mario Jose Bergoglio, was an Italian immigrant from Piedmont who worked as an accountant for the railway. My mother, Regina Maria Savori, was a homemaker, loving, intelligent, deeply faithful. My parents had 5 children, and I was the eldest. We were a close-knit family. Life was not luxurious, but it was filled with meaning. Sunday masses, shared meals, laughter around the dinner table, and discipline that taught me humility and work. My grandmother Rosa, especially, was a profound influence on me. She taught me how to pray. She passed on stories of faith that rooted deep in my soul. I still carry a letter she once wrote me, in my breast pocket, even to this day. It's worn out from time, but her words are fresh in my heart. Never forget that the most important thing is not what the world says of you, but what God sees in you. In my youth, I was not much different from any other Argentine boy. I studied chemistry at the technical school. I loved literature and philosophy. I enjoyed music, soccer, and the tango. Yes, I danced. I had friends, and I even fell in love once during my teenage years. I considered marrying. I still remember that feeling of longing, the questions of a young man. What am I here for? What is my path? Then, when I was 21, everything changed. I fell seriously ill, a life-threatening pneumonia with cysts. Doctors removed part of my right lung. I spent weeks in the hospital. It was a time of immense physical pain, but also spiritual awakening. It was in that hospital bed that I encountered God in a way I never had before. Not through preaching or books, but through silence and surrender. I made a decision in that moment of weakness to give my life entirely to God. Soon after my recovery, I entered the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. Why the Jesuits? Because they went where others didn't. They were missionaries. They worked with the poor, the ignored, the voiceless. And I wanted that. I wanted to be where the wounds of the world were. I took my vows and began my long formation, philosophy in Chile, theology in Buenos Aires, and years of internal struggle and growth. Being a Jesuit taught me something deep, that leadership is service, not status. That poverty is not a burden, but a way of love. In 1969, I was ordained a priest. I was just 32 years old, and from that day, I never stopped walking with people. I taught literature and theology, counseled students, led retreats, and eventually became the provincial superior of the Jesuits in Argentina at just 36. It was a time of political and social turmoil, the era of the dirty war, when thousands were kidnapped, tortured, and disappeared under the military dictatorship. During those years, I lived daily with moral complexity. I hid people at risk. I protected priests and students. I tried to negotiate with the authorities to save lives, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. Some accused me later of not speaking loudly enough. I accept that criticism with humility, but what they don't always know is how much we had to act quietly, because a word too loud could cost someone their life. I have asked forgiveness for any failures during that time, and I believe that mercy covers what clarity sometimes cannot explain. In the 1990s, I became auxiliary bishop, and later the Archbishop of Buenos Aires. I chose to live in a modest apartment rather than the bishop's palace. Cooked my own meals. I took the bus to visit the poor. I didn't want barriers between myself and the people I served. I learned more from the slums of Villa Miseria than I ever did in seminary classrooms. In those dusty, broken places, I saw the face of Christ. In single mothers, abandoned children, drug addicts, street vendors. They were my teachers. In 2001, St. John Paul II made me a cardinal. I was shocked. I remember kneeling before him, trembling inside. I did not want prestige. I only wanted to keep serving. And I continued to speak out against corruption, consumerism, and the culture of exclusion in Argentina. I tried to be a voice for the voiceless. I visited prisoners, washed the feet of AIDS patients, blessed the homeless in silence. I preached that the church must be close to the wounds of the world, not locked behind cathedral walls. Then came 2013. Pope Benedict XVI resigned, a brave and humble act. I traveled to Rome for the conclave. I brought only a small bag. I expected nothing. But in the Sistine Chapel, as the votes mounted, I knew something was shifting. My heart was pounding. When I was elected, I prayed quietly, "Lord, don't forget your mercy." And when asked what name I would take, I chose Francis, in honor of Saint Francis of Assisi. He was a man of peace, simplicity, and care for the poor and the earth. That is the Pope I wanted to be. Since then, I have tried to live that mission. I opened the doors of the church to the wounded, the divorced, the forgotten. I traveled to war zones, refugee camps, and favelas. I launched Laudato Si, calling the world to protect our common home. I wrote Amoris Laetitia, to embrace the complexity of family life with mercy. I pushed for interfaith dialogue, met with Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, and atheists alike. Because love does not ask for passports. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic brought the world to its knees. I stood alone in a dark, rainy St. Peter's Square, praying for humanity. That night, I felt the weight of the entire planet's suffering on my shoulders. But I also felt hope that we might come out of this more united, more humble, more loving. I've aged. My body grows weak. My voice is softer now. I move slower, but my spirit remains full of fire. I often say, the church is not a fortress to be defended, but a field hospital to heal wounds. We must go out, not stay in. We must build bridges, not walls. I am now an old man, yes, but I am still your servant. I am still Jorge. I am still the young boy from Flores who loved God, the young Jesuit who almost died, the bishop who rode the bus, the Pope who cries at the suffering of migrants and smiles at the laughter of children. This is my life. It is not perfect, but it has been poured out, like a candle burning down with joy, for love. And if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Never forget the poor. Never be afraid of tenderness. Never stop believing in mercy. And never doubt, not even for a second, that God loves you deeply, completely, and forever. Thank you for listening to my journey.